Welcome to Ellis Beetle Magazine.
Challenge accepted. Ready for a fun challenge? Unbox an adventure with Beetle Go puzzles. Our puzzles are designed to be as fun and engaging as they are beautiful. With a wide variety of unique designs featuring everything from majestic landscapes of national parks to quirky wildlife, there's a perfect puzzle for everyone. They make fantastic gifts and are a great way to bring the family together for hours of entertainment. Find your next favorite pastime. Shop the fun at BeetleGo.com. That's Beetle-Go.com.
Beetle go, get up and go.
The Ghost of Lindsey, written by Ken Freimuth, narrated by Ken Freimuth. I need to tell you from the get-go that I believe in ghosts. I have seen or experienced a number of them over the years. Why am I telling you this fact about myself? Only because I believe that it reveals that I am tuned to these sorts of events. In most cases, the experience was not frightening, though I usually wondered who the ghost was or why he or she had appeared to me. My encounter with the Ghost of Lindsey was one of those exceptions. It was a frightening experience. The Ghost of Lindsey is the name I give to an apparition I had in the early 1980s. I was an Army officer assigned to a military unit on Lindsey Air Station in Wiesbaden, Germany. Lindsey Air Station is no more. It was shut down at the end of the Cold War. But at one time, it was a small but busy U.S. military installation in the city of Wiesbaden, a few miles southwest of the Wiesbaden Hauptbahnhof, or main rail station, off of Schiersteinerstrasse. In the 70s and 80s, it housed quite a few U.S. Air Force organizations and a joint staff outfit, the one to which I was assigned. I understood at the time that Lindsey Air Station had been a German Army facility during World War II. Some of the buildings still had swastikas and other indications of Nazi use during the war. Our buildings were on the back side or the northwest corner of the compound. As I recall, we occupied buildings B02 and B04, separated by a quadrangle and a chapel. I was in the command section on the second or top floor of B04. Because I was the command security officer, my office was fairly secure, with a heavy metal door secured by a combination lock. My windows looked out over the quadrangle toward the chapel and building B02. My boss, an Air Force colonel now deceased, was several doors down from me on the end of the second floor corridor. His office was fairly large and had large windows that looked out over the gymnasium and athletic fields across the street. If memory serves me well, it has been almost 30 years since I left Lindsey, the buildings were fairly dreary. The usually gray German weather did not make them any more cheery, but I'd not picture them as a location for shooting a horror or ghost movie. I had a good time in that assignment and enjoyed working for my boss and the people in the organization. I would say that it was in 1980 that my experience happened. As the command security officer, it was part of my job to go to the communications center to pick up any classified telegrams or messages that came in for our unit. This, of course, was in the days before encrypted computers. This happened fairly frequently. If I was at work, I simply walked over to the comm center, picked up the papers, put them in a briefcase, and walked back to my office. I would then read them and determine who needed to see them to take action. Then I would secure them in my office safe until someone else needed to see them. If I was at home, I would drive to Lindsey, about a 25-minute drive, and then follow the same process. Often, if I got a call late at night, I would drive to Lindsey, go to the comm center, read the document, and if it was not urgent, lock it up until the next duty day. If I happened to be on travel, my assistant would take care of things in the same manner. We were involved in a war game at the time of my experience. The war game involved our units all over the world, and we would get messages at all hours of the day and night. Some were classified, and I'd have to take care of them. Some were unclassified, and others would pick them up. On this particular night, I was asleep in our quarters in the Alcom American housing area when the phone rang. Always a fast riser, I answered on the first ring. It was the comm center. "Sir, there is a classified message for your organization." I said I'd be right there. It was about 11 p.m. I arrived at Lindsey's comm center at about 11:30 p.m. I read the message, and it was clear that we needed to take no action that night. It could wait until the morning. I had the comm center guys double wrap it for me, and then I walked to building B04, about 1 city block away. Our building had big metal double doors as the main entry. No one was on duty in the building at night, so it was locked, with only outside lights on. Of course, as you might expect in a ghost story, the doors creaked when I opened them, and I had to cross the foyer in the dark to get to the first floor light switches. Having done this many times, it was no big deal. Then I went upstairs to my floor and turned on the corridor lights. At this point, if this were a movie, the audience would be yelling, "Don't go there!" But there was no audience, and this was not a movie. I walked halfway down the corridor to my office and unlocked the big metal doors. I turned on the office light, then went to the safe. I spun the dial on the safe, first left, then right, then left, then back to 0, and opened it. I put the document in the safe, pushed the drawer closed, and spun the dial to assure the safe was locked. Then I turned out my office light, stepped out into the corridor, and closed my office doors. As I was securing the lock, I was overcome with a feeling of dread. I was certain someone was on the floor with me, and I believed it was someone in my boss's office, which was down the corridor to my left as I closed my office. I was drawn to investigate. I walked to my boss's office but did not go in. From the corridor lights, I could see into it as soon as I went through the French doors that separated the corridor from his office area. Right through the French doors was the desk his secretary used. Then, standing in front of that desk, his office was to the right. I was standing in front of the secretary desk looking right into the office. It was fairly dark, with only some light coming in from the corridor and from the street lights outside the windows in his office. Then I saw him. Standing in the colonel's office was a man in what I recognized as a World War II German Army uniform. I believed it was an officer, but I did not recognize the rank. He had a bandage on his left arm from his hand to elbow, and he appeared to be looking not at me, but at someone who could have been sitting in a chair in the corner of the room, out of my sight. So I was looking at him, and he was looking down and to his right. He did not look at me or acknowledge me. I believe his lips were moving, but I heard nothing. As I was looking at him, I noticed that I could see the street light across the street near the athletic field, but I saw it through him. It was about where his heart would be, but I could see through him. Yet he appeared to be a real person. I could see the buttons on his uniform, the bandage, and his face. How long was I there? I don't know. Perhaps a minute, though it seemed much longer. Now, as I said in the beginning, I have seen ghosts before. They were not scary. But as I stood there, a feeling of deep fear overcame me. There was also a feeling of sadness. Perhaps some tragedy occurred to this man or whomever he was looking at or talking to in the corner. Then I realized I was cold, very cold. I could see my breath, though heat was on in the building. I realized I did not belong there, and I turned and ran down the corridor, flipped off the lights, ran down the stairs, turned off the first floor lights, and exited the building. I was shaking when I got back into my car and drove back to my apartment. When I got home, I awakened my wife to tell her I had seen another ghost, but this was a bad one. In the morning, I told my boss about my experience. He and I were friends. He laughed at me and said it must have been my imagination. I assured him it was not, and I asked him not to tell others. About 2 weeks later, I was in my office early in the morning when my boss came in. He asked my secretary to leave and then shut the doors. He appeared shaken. He said, "Don't laugh." I said, "You saw him, didn't you?" He said he'd come in early to prepare for a trip, and as he headed down the hallway to his office, he saw someone walking into his office. He said, "Hey," and then realized that the person was wearing an old World War II German Army uniform and had come out of a wall on the side of the corridor heading across into his office. He said when he got to the office door, no one was there and it was cold. He asked me not to tell anyone in the unit. At his house that night, we talked about it with our wives. That was the end of my experience with the Lindsey ghost, but not the end of the strange happenings at Lindsey Air Station, buildings B02 and B04. Again, as I recall, it was several weeks later, and I got a call to go visit the commander of the Air Force Security Police Unit on Lindsey. In his office, he told me that his officers had responded to a call for help at B04 the night before. He said that a woman employee in our organization had been working late in an office on the second floor, almost across from my office. She was working on what were known then as magnetic card IBM typewriters. These were early word processors that allowed one to save the basic parts of a letter to a magnetic card, and then the machine would type many copies of the letter with the secretary having only to type the addressee's name and address, a salutation, and any other minor changes. This was a fairly noisy machine, and the operators usually wore ear protectors. That night, this secretary was working in the room with the machine noisily typing away. She had on the earmuff-type hearing protectors. The room was closed. She noticed that the door handle began to turn. This was a European-style door handle, a lever, not a knob. In fact, soldiers in Europe used to refer to the U.S. as the land of round doorknobs. Thinking someone was there, she stopped the machine and asked, "Who's there?" There was no response, so she tried to open the door. She said that the handle would not turn. In fact, someone or something was trying to turn it the other way from the other side of the door. She felt that the handle was freezing cold, and she immediately let go and called the security police. Fortunately for her, she was dating one of them, and knowing she was working late, he was outside and was able to respond immediately. His report said that when he got onto the second floor, he heard footsteps in the attic but did not check up there. The secretary said she heard them also. The security police captain said, "You know, sir, my guys believe that building is haunted. They see lights floating around in there at night and will not go in alone when they are responding to an alarm." I thanked him, took the report, and went to see my boss. My boss and I decided we needed to check the attic. The attic doors were locked. I had a key. The attic was very large, but not one that we could go into. It was full of pigeon droppings, dust, dead pigeons, and it had roof braces all through it. It would be impossible or difficult to walk or run up there. We noted that there were no footprints in the pigeon droppings or dust. At staff meeting that morning, my boss announced that no one would work alone late at night anymore. When asked why, he told the story about the secretary and the security police response. Someone said, "Think that's something? You ought to see what goes on in building B02. Immediately, stories of strange events seemed to be coming from everyone. One story: I was working late at night in building B02 when I heard a noise. I looked out of my office and saw papers flying into the hallway from an office down the hall. Thinking someone had left a window open, I walked down, picked up the papers, and put them back on a desk. There were no open windows. I went back to my office and sat down, only to hear the noise again. I looked, and the papers were flying into the hallway again. I left. Another person told of the time his jacket kept being thrown from a rack by someone or something out into the hall. I began to talk to people who said they believed the building had tunnels that went to the center of the city to the main rail station. Supposedly, these were to allow the Nazi senior officers to escape the city in the event of an Allied bombing. Wiesbaden, by the way, was spared during the war. I found the doors in the cellar and my boss and I opened them. There were tunnels. We walked about 100 or 200 yards into them and came across barricades. We decided to go no further. So that part of the mystery, if there is one, was never resolved by us. A postscript. I was back in Germany on another assignment in the late 1980s. I was in Mannheim. I got a call one afternoon from a man who said he was a reporter with a newspaper in Mainz, Germany, across the Rhine River from Wiesbaden. He asked if I was the former Major Freimuth who'd served at Lindsey Air Station in the late 70s and the early 80s. I said yes. He said he was doing a story on the Lindsey ghost and had gotten my name. I told him I did not want to talk about it. He asked, "May I ask if you went into the tunnels?" I said I had gone into them, but had only gone a short distance when I encountered barricades and stopped. He asked if I knew where they led. I said I did not. Conversation ended. I was glad. I could not afford in the job I had then to have a reputation as a ghostbuster. I no longer have that job, and I'm now free to tell my story. Who is the Lindsey ghost? I have no idea. But I believe he is someone who does not want to leave Lindsey or have us forget that he once walked this earth too. Perhaps when I meet him someday, he'll tell me the rest of the story. The Ghost of Lindsey, written and narrated by Ken Freimuth.
The Nexarch, written by Samuel Kelly. It is with a mind teetering on the edge of utter ruin that I set down these words, a desperate and likely futile attempt to chart the abyssal horrors unleashed from that accursed place, once known to the occupying forces as Lindsey Air Station. My name, once respected in antiquarian circles, is of no consequence now. I am only a chronicler of a terror that defies all human reason, a witness to a truth so ancient and malevolent that its mere shadow can scour sanity from the firmest of intellects. Prologue. The Forbidden Tome of Building A, 19. In the cold early morning hours within the library of Building A-19, nestled along Stephen Street at the Lindsey Air Station in Wiesbaden, Germany. Few lights glimmered against the institutional silence. Rows of weathered volumes sat undisturbed, except for one, an ancient leather-bound book locked inside a glass case in the restricted archive. Known in sparse records as the Codex Umbrae, its cover was stamped with a symbol that seemed to writhe and crawl into the vision of those who gazed upon it for too long. Legends whispered that the book had been concealed beneath Wiesbaden's soil since the 3rd century A.D., hidden away by an incomprehensible figure, thought by some to be an ancient shaman, ensuring its malevolent secrets would remain untouched through the ages. The book was said to have surfaced during the chaos of World War II, torn from the ruins of a private collection by Nazi hands, and then secreted away by a desperate librarian who understood that its rightful place was never to be found. 77 pages made up the codex. 66 of them, written in a multitude of languages, existed for the sole purpose of delivering a single dire warning. Do not read aloud the words inscribed herein. Each page contains a slumbering evil. Recitation will release it upon the world. Burning this book will unleash all 66 at once, bringing about calamity for mankind. These grave cautions were printed in English, Mandarin Chinese, Hindi, Spanish, Arabic, French, Portuguese, Russian, Bengali, and Japanese, in a desperate hope that the peril would be universally understood. Yet curiosity is the most ancient of curses. On a rain-slicked morning, a young library assistant named Hermanine Voigt discovered the codex while taking inventory. Her eyes, hungry for mystery and meaning, skated over the dire prefaces. Perhaps it was disbelief, or perhaps the pull of something older and darker. With a nervous laugh, she opened to the 77th page, a page adorned with the sigil of Nyxaroth and titled only The Right of Calling. Despite the inked words screaming their warning in a chorus of tongues, "Do not read," Hermanine sounded out the phrases aloud. She stumbled through the strange guttural syllables, her voice echoing ominously in the lonely stacks. From the first uttered phrase, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Frost snaked across the glass of the high windows. Lights dimmed, flickered, and then failed entirely, leaving only a sickly, spectral glow from the corridors outside. There, emerging from the shadow under the main desk, came what could not possibly exist. It was a menacing, basketball-sized cluster of writhing, black, slimy horsehair worms, nematomorpha of impossible size and darkness, collectively conscious, glistening with grotesque moisture, and moving with an ominous will. Each writhing tendril was alive, questing, searching. This was Nyxaroth, the Woeweaver, newly freed into the physical world. Hermione's scream was strangled as the writhing mass lunged. The worms inexorably slithered over her face, finding her nose, ears, mouth, and a razor-thin paper cut on her palm. In moments she was silenced, devoured from within, as the Woeweaver consumed her body and soul, leaving behind nothing but a collapsed, empty figure on the cold floor. The Codex Umbrae lay open beside her, its warnings now mocking in the chilling, spectral silence. The first of the 66 entities was unbound. The library's archives seemed to close in upon themselves in dread. As Nyxaroth, the Woeweaver, filled the husk of Hermione, it gathered the scattered threads of its own horrific intellect. It remembered. It knew what it was, and it sensed who it must find. Somewhere out there was a beacon of supernatural light, a soul of rare and terrifying power, a Nexarch. A Nexarch, the one whose spirit is the confluence of shaman, seer, animist, and medium, a living bridge between the seen and unseen worlds. In the lore of the Codex, this term describes the rarest and most feared of mortals, whose existence upsets the balance between planes and whose energy, if devoured, would make Nyxaroth god of the undertow. Having failed to find a Nexarch before being discovered in the 3rd century and imprisoned in the text, Nyxaroth understood that it must remain hidden. It watched and learned that, like the Romans of old, an unrecognized figure attempting to pass a guarded gate would mean swift discovery. After claiming Hermione, the Woeweaver did not simply discard her essence. Instead, it wove remnants of her consciousness into its own emerging hive mind, leaving her awareness to drift, a phantom whisper in the entity's collective dark. By noon, it found another host, a maintenance worker passing through the library's basement corridors, shivering at a breeze that felt not of this earth. A glance, a cold hand brushed his arm. The Woeweaver took root, and the worker collapsed, his eyes wide with an unseeable horror. Building A-19 became its hidden home, and each person who entered its sphere of influence was a potential vessel. Nyxaroth searched their minds, learning their ways of speaking, their memories, their fears. In each new host, it repeated its strategy, subsuming, not erasing, what remained of their identities, allowing slivers of their personalities to act as camouflage. This chilling technique let the Woeweaver stay expertly concealed, its malice undetected as it passed from person to person. With every transition, it grew more skilled at cloaking its true nature, moving outward from the airbase and into the heart of the city, ever honing its ability to mask itself while stalking the resonance of the Nexarch. The Nexarch, a composite of shaman, seer, medium, and animist. They are the most powerful beings that can straddle the natural and supernatural. Though only one exists at a time, the universe places them randomly across history. They can be anywhere on the planet, likely hiding in plain sight. They live and die as humans do, but they have an option: the undertow. To enter it is to live forever, but never return. To the natural world, they are dead. In the undertow, they become one with the supernatural. The Woeweaver remembered its purpose. It sensed who it must find. From the window of its host, through an extension of its consciousness, it saw a man walking by. It learned his name, Ken Freimuth. Freimuth, it contemplated. His energy was an encompassing beacon to the Woeweaver. Never had it been this close. It must be patient. But it also saw others following him, figures clothed in what the hive mind identified as uniforms, though of a strange and varied make. They were supernatural guardians. They followed him intently. The Woeweaver wondered why they followed instead of consuming him. There were 5 of them. As they passed the window, they stopped and looked, not at the man, but into the man, into the eyes of its extension. They could see it. They all shook their heads in a slow, deliberate human gesture of no. So, they were protecting him. The entity's purpose was singular, to consume Ken Freimuth. It could sense him across the country if need be. He carried a psychic energy it had not felt for eons. The Woeweaver knew that consuming such an essence and soul would grant it unimaginable power. It would become the god of the undertow. This place, this Wiesbaden air base, sat perfectly within its own paranormal triangle: Niederhausen, Mainz, and Schlangenbad. Underneath, the tunnels led to a gateway into the undertow, the secret geography of this planet, a network of abyssal places lying beneath the world's paranormal triangles: Bermuda, the Dragon Sea, the Bennington, and the Brierie Triangle. These are not mere locations of strange phenomena. They are gateways, metaphysical transit hubs to other nodes across the globe and into realms beyond. To control the undertow is to hold dominion over the arteries of reality itself. And so the hunt began. The thing wearing the skin of its latest host traveled to buildings B02 and B04, inexorably drawn toward Freimuth. The Woeweaver watched as Freimuth experienced the unfolding reality of the other side. It peered around corners, hid in shadowed places, watching him. The entities following Freimuth tried to warn him of its presence, just as it planned its strike. When Freimuth would be distracted by the spectral soldier, it would enter and consume him. But Freimuth never returned. The Woeweaver was forced to consume another, standing outside B02, and leave the Wiesbaden Triangle in search of the Nexarch. It hunted for years, searching the triangles of the world, probing the entrances to the undertow, unable to enter without the essence of the current Nexarch. Now it stands on the edge of the Brierie Triangle, in a place called Eden, Utah. It can feel the Nexarch's energy. It is autumn, and it will cross the Nordic Valley. Far away, Ken Freimuth lived quietly. He wrote and told his story of spectral cold and flickers at the edge of vision, attributing it all to his lifelong sensitivities. He did not know he was the Nexarch, was unaware of the ancient codex or its opening, or that something older than the world's oldest ghosts hunted his every echo. The Woeweaver continued its approach, moving secretly at night over the mountain, fastening its sights on Freimuth's home. It now sat in its true form, having left its host behind on the mountain, where it would likely be discovered by animals who would, in turn, become part of the hive mind. The mass of black, writhing horsehair worms threatened outside his window, eager to cross the last divide. The Nexarch, Ken, felt a faint chill, but thought nothing of it. Or did he? Was it a trap? All Nexarchs are skilled, attuned, always prepared. The Woeweaver paused, deciding if it should wait for the next Nexarch. After contemplating for a moment, Ken Freimuth turned and looked directly at the Woeweaver. A moment later, he stood outside, facing the ancient Nyxaroth. Ken was not afraid, and as 6 other figures, or what used to be people, now under the full control of the Woeweaver, made themselves known, Ken still was not afraid. The Nexarch, written by Samuel Kelly.
Challenge accepted. Ready for a fun challenge? Unbox an adventure with Beetle Go puzzles. Our puzzles are designed to be as fun and engaging as they are beautiful. With a wide variety of unique designs featuring everything from majestic landscapes of national parks to quirky wildlife, there's a perfect puzzle for everyone. They make fantastic gifts and are a great way to bring the family together for hours of entertainment. Find your next favorite pastime. Shop the fun at BeetleGo.com. That's Beetle-Go.com.
Beetle go, get up and go.
We've reached the close of another episode from Ellis Beetle Magazine Podcast, a place where creativity, storytelling, and nostalgia come together. If these reflections sparked memories or new ideas, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode packed with stories that celebrate the magic of imagination. Visit ellisbeetle.com for information about projects and features straight from our creative studio. And don't forget to stop by beetlego.com for a curated selection of camping and outdoor-themed products, while highlighting national parks, state parks, and recreation. Stay connected with us on Instagram. Find us at Ellis Beetle and at GoBeetleGo for a regular dose of inspiration and updates. Until next time, keep embracing your creativity and honoring the stories and experiences that shape you. Thanks for listening.